I never get tired of talking about this film because the talent up here is insane. How many of you have actually seen Maestro before? I'm just curious. Look at that. Look at that. And then we've got first-timers too. And then we've got people who've seen it like 5 times. As I said, I'm so excited to break down this conversation with you because Maestro, this is Bradley Cooper's second film that he's directed, and the work that he did as far as research, prepping with you, you all getting to work with Lenny's family, like, talk about how that helped you in your craft. And Kevin, I'm going to start with you and work down.
Well, I'll start from the very beginning because I get hired pretty early on in the process. And I live a few blocks from Bradley in New York, so we would meet early on at his house with the voice coach, Tim Monick, in the corner of the room. And Bradley was already in character, holding a cigarette, doing Lenny's voice while we were having the first pre-production meetings about the script and what we were doing. So I felt like it was in my head from a very early point, and it was lovely to have an incredibly long prep period because we did shut down for almost a year for COVID because we wanted to record all the things live and we couldn't do it on the schedule that was first set up. So during the downtime, you're still thinking about all this research and going deep into it, and you just gradually absorb it all and think about how it's going to apply to the story and how you're going to use it. So that was the very beginning for me, and then it just grew from that. But I think, for the most part, you for a movie that goes through decades like this, you absorb the material and then you let it go, and you have it inside you. You have a foundation and a base of these periods and what the story was, and then you go into what the key parts of the relationships were and how we were going to navigate those.
Yeah. And Michelle, I mean, my goodness, the editing, the right? Yes, right? I mean, talk about your prep with Bradley and working with him.
This is probably the first time I have been brought on so early into the process. I mean, typically I might read a script, a couple of months prior to coming to actually starting, but I started a full year before actual principal photography actually started, and it was actually much later than many other people did. But I began with working with him on a proof of concept of the film, which is based on the script that was existing at the time and many different makeup and camera tests that they had shot. I don't know, there might have been 2 or 3 times they'd shot before I came on, and then we started to put something together based on the script just to get a feel for how, black and white footage would look with color footage, and it was a chance for him to look at how the makeup looked like on camera and everything, and also even playing with the real Murrow interview and how that felt within the body of the film, and using the voices and also the music as well.
Amazing. And that opening sequence where we see him, in his later years, such an incredible opening shot. Tom, what about for you working with Bradley?
Well, I'd done A Star is Born with Bradley, and we started talking about this then. So, at that point, I didn't know a whole lot about it, a little bit of what he told me and stuff. And, we were just excited about what it could sound like, with Leonard's music and the technology that we have today, being able to use that. But then there's a big gap because, all these great artists are doing all their work while we're, kind of waiting for all that to be done. So, sound is really kind of pretty late in the process. I mean, ultimately, we're kind of the last thing wrapping up. even though we may be starting before that. But so we met, we talked a few times, and kind of discussed some of. This is after they've already shot stuff, right? So there's some cut of the movie that
we saw the December 8th cut in 2022.
Right.
Which was one of our first full shot versions of the film, and where we really sort of started talking about the quality of the sound or things we want to try.
So at that point there was kind of baked in challenges, I'll say. There was a lot of the way production was recorded and what was shot. There was
black and white film camera had
the camera noise was really loud, and it was all over the place.
Yeah.
It was like loud here and lower here, and So anyway, then that was my first meeting of the actual content and kind of going, oh boy, we got a job to do. But it was great. We just, dug in from there and talked about what he wanted to do. And he really wanted, a big factor was that he wanted, Leonard's music to be a character in the movie. And, at that point in time, we were talking about actually using the original recordings, and most of that stuff's very old. We tried to find original masters and multi-tracks and stuff that we could be able to sort of get into the parts and be able to take advantage of it in Atmos, but we couldn't get to any of that. So ultimately we decided we had to re-record everything, and he got the London Symphony Orchestra, and we went, and it's a lot of story to it, but basically a lot of work went into just trying to match what
was in Neely Cathedral.
Yeah, well, it's not just that, but that was sort of
the impetus. Yeah.
The thing was, we did this first temp mix, and we had all these stereo versions of all the music that you hear in the movie. And Ely was live. It was all recorded live. And so I had all of the elements for that. So I was able to, at that point, we were only in 5.1, but I was able to spread it out and make it huge. And so as we're working through the movie, it's like, okay, yeah, it's good, sounds good. And then we get to that, and it was like, oh my gosh. And Bradley goes, I think we better look at re-recording all this music. So Jason Reuter, our supervising music editor, set that up, and we went and recorded everything. So it gave us the control we needed to really milk all of that in Atmos and use today's technology to hear these great, older compositions.
Wow. I didn't know that you had to redo that. There you go. See, we all learn something new every time. Mark, the costumes, right? Incredible. The detail, the texture, the fabric. You are you're creating costumes that are iconic, that people have seen. But talk about your prep, working with Bradley, Felicia's wardrobe, and of course, working with having access to Lenny's family. Well, his children worked on it with you.
The first time Bradley and I talked about this, we were working together on Licorice Pizza. He was in that film, and I was designing, and he was just about to go into camera tests to do some makeup tests, and thought it would be a good idea to have some clothing. So we'd worked together on Silver Linings Playbook, so we knew each other. There was a trust there, and I was really excited about it. It seemed really interesting, and especially with helping to make a complete look with Kazu's work. That was really exciting to me. and we hit it off. I never left. Okay, I stayed on the show and did a lot of research for those camera tests that got me on that road. It's a wonderful challenge to try to represent sort of 40 years of a person's life and the different beats of the story, and how do you do that the best way and make sure you're very scrupulous with each of the periods to tell a story, which is what a big part of my idea of costume design is, the planning to tell a story, to help give emphasis, So we poured over a ton of research, a lot of primary research. And then, as Kevin said, you put that aside, and sometimes you use things that you find from research because they're absolutely perfect emblems of how Lenny presented himself to the world. Or you see a photograph that isn't exactly that moment in time, but it will give a resonance to a scene. And so use that because it was something Lenny wore. I think Felicia's less well documented, so we were able to use our imaginations a little bit, or things were written into the script that I think the fact that she was wearing a Chanel suit to go to the doctor's was written into the script. We don't know what she wore, but I thought it was a great idea because, clothing as armor, she couldn't possibly get bad news if she's wearing Chanel, things like that. You'd think about a person, how they live their lives, what might be going through their mind, and then use that to give them an outer shell for all that incredible work that Bradley and Carrie did for their characters.
I love that he wrote the Chanel suit into the script. Like, that's just such a testament to Bradley Cooper and
to
Josh
knowing
Singer.
the characters too, to have researched and to understand who they were and their place in society and how they lived.
I love that. Kazu, the transformation is insane, right? 4 decades. You are taking, as I said, in that opening scene, you look at that and you're like, wait, that's Bradley Cooper? I think that's the first reaction, right? It's such an incredible thing that you did. Talk about, there's a few things I want you to talk about. First of all, I want this audience to hear the story of who recommended you for the role. And then, the process of, transforming Bradley without making him look like a caricature, or just helping him disappear into that through the various stages that you worked on.
Yes. So what happened was Bradley was initially testing with other person, and it was going well. And at that time, Bradley was working with Guillermo del Toro on a Nightmare Alley, and so they had a meeting. I think it was on the roof of his house. And so Bradley asked Guillermo who would be the best person to do that job with. And so Guillermo said, Kazu is the only one who can do this. And so that was a start. And so Leonard Bernstein was really a big inspiration for me when I was a teenager, because I saw his documentary and it really inspired me to do my best to achieve my goal. And so, and I was thinking someday I want to work on a film about him. And so that was like 37 years ago. And finally, this came to me. And so it was a great timing, because Bradley had a passion to make a movie about Lenny, and I had a passion too, so our paths crossed. And so we started to do a test makeup on 2020, because originally we were starting to film 21. And so we because Bradley never had that much of the makeup on him before, like a prosthetic makeup on his face. So we started from 2 different stages, like oldest and middle stage, and started to do that. And so we can feel each other, how he feel about the makeup on him. And I wanted to know how comfortable he would be with the makeup on, because he had to direct and act and produce and co-write at the same time. It's a lots of job. So because I knew it would be tough for him every day being in makeup and start, like in the morning, and then start to work with the other crew and the film, It's so we end up filming with him 50 days, and the total filming days was 52 days. So he was pretty much in makeup every day. And so the best at the beginning we were talking about what is the most important thing is the believability, and also we had so much respect to the Leonard Bernstein, so we wanted to really make it authentic and pay respect and show the love to him to really create, resurrect him in the movie, and so that was an important part. And eventually, kind of after we did a test makeup, a first test makeup was at my studio. Then we did a film test at Disney Concert Hall, and with Paul Thomas Anderson filming, and Steven Spielberg was there, and it was really nerve-wracking thing. It's because we never do a first film test like that way, it usually happens in a small scale. And so we get to the point, okay, probably it would be better to be a kind of hybrid of Bradley and Lenny, because it will be comfortable for Bradley, and also less stuff on his face so he can act comfortably. So that was an important part. Yeah.
So amazing, all these stories we're hearing and just hearing about your work. I mean, you mentioned talk about the collaboration process of how you all work together to, say Felicia's dress, when she's in the apartment, when it moves into color, Mark, the conversations that you had with Kevin and Kazu to, Carey Mulligan, right? Come on, everybody, right? Phenomenal. But those conversations that you had as far as the color in the bedroom or the living room, versus what she would wear, so that she's not green on green.
Yeah, Kevin and I would go to Kevin's office, and we would just go through all the location photos.
We would shut the door.
Stuff. We would shut the door and
so it's not too disturbing.
And look at, because some of the location photos were on the back of the door. And he's amazing, and I could ask, I'm thinking of this color or this. I was thinking of doing it like this. Is that going to work? Because he has different conversations with Bradley than I do, and things that are on location scouts I never hear. So I was trying to download some information, and it was very easy. We were all in the same building. Kevin, you around? Can I come by and we'll talk about things? I'll show him a piece of fabric or something like that. And it's so interesting to think back on your process, Kazu, because they did all this work, and they continue to pare away. Really, so that Bradley's eyes were there, his soul, could be Lenny's soul, and it's just amazing. It's been an amazing process to watch that evolve from our first tests at Disney Hall in 2020. Wow. That's when I came on with the clothes, and it's just, you just pared it down to this beautiful work that you see on the film. So it's great to have a front row seat to that too. But Kevin and I, we were always in touch.
Yeah, I think that also Bradley, his communication and his understanding of what each department did, he really understood the set designs. He really understood how to read plans. He has a great eye. He understands color. He communicates really well with Mark. He communicates really well with me. We share that information. I think when you see the film, you can tell that it all feels like a single piece. There's the disciplines are woven together in a way that's very lyrical and understated and nuanced. And I think that that's all coming from the collaboration we had because of Bradley's leadership and how open he was and how he shared he shared with us his feelings about the emotional core of what was happening in each scene and which part of their relationship was happening at that time. And that would inform the color palettes or the textures or the layout of the set design.
Well, to your point, one scene that, really sticks with you is the Thanksgiving scene when they're in the bedroom and they're having their argument. And Matthew Libatik's cinematography is so powerful at that point because it's just, that's the one, right? Where he's there, he's subjective. Like, talk about the outfits they would wear for that scene, why it was set in the bedroom, and obviously with the Snoopy in the background, and then the cut, because the scene before that, she's talking about, she expresses exactly how she feels, and then you've got that argument. So, yeah.
I think it was a challenge to the apartment that they were in at that stage of their marriage was the legendary Dakota apartment that we built on a stage. And it was important for me, being a New Yorker who had been in that building several times and understood the feeling of the Dakota, to get that scene right, or all the scenes in that set, the party scene, and then also Thanksgiving, and then the argument in the bedroom. It was a point of their relationship that was heavy and sad. Things were falling apart at that point, as you can tell by the scenes that take place there. And the Dakota is very heavy, the architecture, the dark moldings, the thickness of the walls, and it's a grand scale. It shows wealth and culture and like where they were in their life. But the color choices and the details not only show you the nuanced period that they're in, along with the costumes, but I think all those scenes in the Dakota marks costumes, especially for Felicia, stand out in a way against the palette of the apartment and the darkness of what was going on in their life at that time. And she's in this sort of glimmering, tasteful, classy wardrobe,
Yeah, Mark, talk about that.
For that scene,
For
for Thanksgiving, yeah. It's her look is kind of based on a photograph of Lenny and Felicia at the Black Panther party that they had at their house. They're posing, and she sort of has this high-collared dress on. It's short. It's like was in vogue at that period. But she had the multi-strand necklace, and I thought that's a great touchstone. I found this Balmain pattern. We found fabric, dyed it. I wanted it to feel autumnal, Thanksgiving. I drove my assistants crazy with we got to find some holiday houndstooth fabric to make a double-breasted jacket for Lenny. And so you feel like it's Thanksgiving. They stand alone on where they are in their lives, but it's based on something. The holiday houndstooth was my fancy. We don't know that he ever wore it, but he was a man of the moment, so that was in style at the time. So let's do it. It just they hold their own as characters without being distracting, and I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that it doesn't interfere at all. It only quietly enhances who they are and what's going on.
I'll say one more thing about the Snoopy scene, which is Bradley was hoping that it could be done in one master, so that he didn't have to cut out of the emotion that was going on in the scene for the two actors. So he set up the camera where he wanted it to be in the corner of the bedroom and composed the two windows. And then I sat with him for 30 minutes, and we knew if that frame was going to be there for a long time, people were going to dissect every detail of that frame, because you're used to cutting and you don't see things you don't stare at a room like that for that long generally. So he and I together sort of tweaked and painted the details of that scene. We would move a painting a little higher, a little lower. We would be very careful about the pillows on the window seats, to tell the story the way he felt we could do most from one angle of a scene. And it was a really fun process. And that was an example of how intimately he became involved with every department, and how there was a constant dialogue going on between him and all the department heads.
Well, Michelle, talk about getting the daily for that scene and seeing that for the first
Single
time.
daily. No, there's. No, I think there were. That might have been the second to last take. I really need to check that, but I have a memory of that. And yeah, I don't remember a lot because I didn't spend very much time on that particular scene. I just cut the one thing and put it in. But I mean, for me, in terms of editing and the way that Bradley and I edited the film, really, it's really the setup for the power of that scene, other than the wonderful performances and just taking in what's happening, is really in the setup that comes far before that. And, you know, I like to, you know, after watching this film, I mean, I see it thousands of times, but I did notice that it felt like it was the last bookend to another book, to the other bookend, which was them by the pool, talking in this tight, with the fence
The
and
arbor.
and the hardware cloth, like just imprisoning them, and they're having this argument, and he's trying to get up and get out and whatever, and she really isn't expressing herself. She is not really telling him how she feels. She's sort of trying and then sort of gets squashed a little bit, and she's covered with this big straw hat. And I think, you know, from there we uncovered, you know, he's developing Mass, and he finishes Mass, and we have this whole release where she jumps into the pool, and the music just really builds, and it really lands you in that scene to be ready for her, you know, as when you're seeing during Mass, she is, you know, realizing I can't do this anymore. And you see, there's just that look on her face and that French over when she's sitting there. And then when that long shot of her finally walking away in that wonderful, what is that dress that she's wearing? She's wearing a shawl, the blue, walking away.
No, the at the Mass premiere.
Yes.
At the Mass premiere.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's like an overlay of the same dress, sort of a poncho style with ruffles.
Just beautiful. It always like.
Yeah, and there's a
see it.
flourish, and and it creates drama when we see her putting his pajamas outside the hotel room.
Yes,
you know,
and the slippers.
Yeah.
And actually, towards the end, it might have been the last week of the mix. You know, we decided to start cutting. We cut out a whole shot of them walking down the hall, but it lent itself so that the music landed after the slippers and into the foyer when he's like, who left the Snoopy here? You know, somebody abandoned Snoopy, and so you're kind of ready for, you know, what is going to happen now. He's back at the house, and this whole drama has happened, and you're ready for that scene. So really, it's all about, like, our work really throughout the film was setting up for these dramatic keystone moments to really land.
And they do land because you feel those dramatic moments. I want to go back to Ely Cathedral, Tom, and the mic setup that you had to do for that, because I think people don't realize that was a live performance.
Yeah, so this involves a lot more people than me, but yeah, that was one of the sort of key elements that Bradley had sort of dialed into in the very beginning of putting the movie together in his head. He had seen footage of the real thing and just kind of knew like that was going to be a major part of the movie. And so Jason Reuter, who was the music editor, he started working early on to try to figure that out, and basically they end up getting a company that is called Classic Sound that has recorded there before and had recorded the London Symphony Orchestra a lot, actually. And so he knew they were the right people to work with and to get this. And so they then had to go scout out that location. You know, they're like, I don't know how high the ceilings are, but a couple 100 feet probably. I mean, it's like...
Miles.
It's a real cathedral.
Yeah. So they had to figure out how they were going to rig it and hang microphones from the ceiling because they couldn't be in the shot. There actually are, I think, 2 microphones that, if you look, you can find in there because you could see those in the original footage. So they match that exactly. But that basically allowed, the setup to be able to do this big one tracking shot that was able to then capture all of that live. There was 60 some odd microphones hanging from the ceiling. And, Bradley went out there and conducted, and, in the end, I get all that material back. There's kind of a step in between that and me where it gets all broken down into a whole bunch of 5.1 stems that are kind of each of the food groups, brass and strings and the choir and the different parts. And then I've got to construct that in Atmos to make it feel like we're actually tracking over the orchestra. And, as we dial in and we turn around, all of a sudden the choir hits their part and we come around to the soloist, that all those things feel like they're really happening right there and they're in the right place. And the trick to it, that's a little tricky sometimes, is that if you're too literal with that, it kind of breaks the beautiful spread of all this music. And so you have to make it feel like that's what's happening, even though you're not, 100% doing what's happening, because, again, it would be too, if we're way out front and the whole thing's behind us in that corner over there, that would sound bad. So we want to give that feeling. And so, that was the trick of that scene. And we knew all along that was this climactic peak in the movie. And it's, the expression, of that he is, his heart is full of love, not of hate, as she says at the end of that performance. And so all that you hear is all live, including the space of the actual room, when the music ends and it kind of rings out for a long time. That's the actual Ely Cathedral.
Amazing. It's so amazing. Kazu, last question. I want you to tell the audience how long it took for you to transform Bradley in the last stages.
Well, last stages. Okay.
Yes.
It was about 5 hours. Because it takes 5 hours. It's like you can travel from LA to New York. It's because it's really it had the most prosthetic on him, because I had to. He's 46 at that time, and they had to be 71, and everything changes. And even we had the bodysuits, and we had to do arm, with hair punched in, and so face a head had 14 pieces, and a wig on. So originally, I was going to do a makeup with a team, with the other person. And Bradley is really, because in the morning is such an important time for him to think about the whole day. And so during the makeup, I could tell he's thinking all the time, what he's going to do that day. So if 2 persons standing next to him, it's he's kind of get too much energy floating around. So he said, "Can you do it by yourself?" Okay. It might take a little longer though. Yeah, that's fine. I need a space. And so that's why, everyday application, I had assistant Megan Longmire. She's basically set up the table and clean up after my mess, But I had to do a makeup by myself, and so the youngest one was a little over 2 hours. And the oldest one, I did application and the painting and everything in 4 hours and a half. And that day, I had to have a 2 assistant because the arm has to go at the same time, or end up taking like 7 hours, you know. So and then Loli McCoy Bell, the Bradley's personal hair person, and she put the wig on, and we finished up the makeup. But at the same, usually a call time for the last stage is like a 1 a.m. Yeah. And so we start the makeup, you know, that early. And he also, Bradley wanted to makeup to be done at the crew call. So that means automatically adding 2 hours to our day, you know. So because he wanted to show up as Lenny on set. So that was a tough day, but good thing was we only did maybe three days of filming with makeup. Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm never going to think of a flight. Every time I fly from LA to New York, I'm going to think, this is how long it took Bradley Cooper to transform in Maestro.
Yeah, it's easier to do makeup in 5 hours than the fly for 5 hours.
Incredible. You're all insanely talented. Congratulations on Maestro. Thank you so much for sharing insight into your process.
You.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out today for Variety's Artisan Screening Series. Thank you.